She was a very outgoing person.
Yeah.
Bubbly, just an overall great human being. I'm heartbroken. She deserves justice and she's not receiving it.
I cannot promise you a life of sunshine. I cannot promise riches, wealth, or gold. I cannot promise you an easy pathway that leads away from change or growing old. But I can promise all my heart's devotion, a smile to chase away your tears of sorrow, a love that's ever true and ever growing, a hand to hold in yours through each tomorrow.
It's very rare that I bring you guys a story that I'm about to present to you now. Normally when I do these cases, it's either unsolved or, we know the outcome. But this case is completely different. I know that we have all heard the saying that the justice system is a joke. And by the end of this video, that statement will basically be solidified. This story made me question humanity as a whole, in terms of empathy, morality. I'm just like, I was really taken back by this case. You will be too. This story begins in Everett, Washington, which currently has a population of just 91,000 people. Everett is a city located just 25 miles north of Seattle. It's home to a vibrant arts culture. It has a big music scene, delicious dining, pubs, breweries. It's home to the Angel of Winds Arena and also has family-oriented festivals year-round. When it comes to crimes and the statistics in that area, 1 of every 27 people will fall victim to either a violent crime or a property crime, which is fairly high, judging by the amount of people in the area. But aside from those statistics, it's actually a pretty nice place to stay. This would also be the home of a victim who would fall to tragic circumstances, a girl who goes by the name of Alyssa Noceda. Born August 25th of 1999, Alyssa Noceda was a live wire. The friends around her remember her having a sassy attitude since the 1st grade. She was a person who was very prone to having a lot of friends, but she also had their back. She was someone that you could depend on. She was the girl who brought the laughs. She was the girl who basically brought the party with her. If you were around her, it was all smiles. Her friends describe her as having a contagious laugh, the laughter that no one could forget. She's described as having a personality that is definitely one of a kind. Now, when Alyssa got into her early teenage years, she wasn't a saint by far. She had her fair share of trouble. However, the trouble that she did get in did not take away from her character. She was someone who was born to her mother at the age of 16. So while she was being raised, her mother was also coming into her own, learning how to be an adult herself. So this put a strain on raising her because they were both learning life at the same time. Alyssa Noceda was a student at Marina High School. She again kept her friends close. She was a popular girl, someone that everyone knew, as again, she was a live wire. She was the life of the party. She was the girl who wasn't afraid to speak her mind. If you see her social medias, she was unapologetic. Alyssa was herself and didn't care what you thought about it. In the year of 2018, Alyssa would be 18 years old. Though she didn't finish high school, her plans were to go back and finish her education. But she was working. She was working at a pizza place. It's a place that she enjoyed working at. But once she saw that all of the friends around her were graduating, it made her change her mind about what direction her life was headed in, and she decided to go back to school. But she would never make it. In the year of 2018, Alyssa was 18 years old, and on February 3rd, she would attend a party The host of this party was a guy who went by the name of Brian Valera. He was 19 years old. He was a guy that she had met through mutual friends. He invited her to the party, so on this night she decided to attend. So she goes to this party. They enjoy themselves, everyone has fun, but the party ends. But after everyone leaves, Alyssa decides to stay back. Now at this time, Alyssa had just broken up with her boyfriend. So the only reason why she was at this party to begin with was, I guess, to speed up the healing process of a breakup. So I guess that at this time she was doing any and everything to keep her mind off of the breakup itself. Well, she stayed back behind with Brian Valera. They're about to start doing drugs. Brian Valera was a local drug dealer, to say at the least. He worked, but he was dabbling in the gang life and drug life itself. So she's here hanging out with this guy and he decides to crush up pills. They would then take turns partaking in this drug, and they would also hit a dab. Now, if you don't know what a dab is, it's basically concentrated THC. Only after Alyssa takes this dab, she immediately goes unconscious. This is when Brian Valera would grab his phone and basically Google search what to do if someone overdoses on Percocets. Only that quick Google search would be the only time he showed any remorse or even tried to help, because evidently after Googling what to do, he never does it. Instead, he decides that while Alyssa is unconscious and lying on the bed, that he would climb on top of her and begin violating. Now, climbing on top of an unconscious person to have your way is bad in itself, but it gets even worse from here, because after he's done, he decides that he'll take a picture of her. And he sends this picture in a group chat. This group chat was belonging to Brian Valera and a few of his friends. He would send the picture while she was on his bed, passed out, and he would say, laughing out loud, "I think she OD'd, so I'm smashing her to pass the time." Now, after him and his friends had a good laugh off of this in this group chat, he decides to pick up his video game controller and play video games until he says he passed out around 4:11 in the morning, in which he went to sleep. Now, when Brian Valera wakes up the next morning, he discovers that Alyssa isn't moving, she isn't breathing, her lips are discolored, and at this point, he knows that she's deceased. So at this point, he's panicking. Well, at least to his testimony, because I don't believe that. Now, me personally, I don't think that there's any way in hell that you can climb on top of an unconscious person and violate them and somehow not realize that they're not moving or breathing until the next morning, but this is his account. Now, on that morning, he takes Alyssa's lifeless finger, places it on her iPhone to unlock it, and then he accesses her Snapchat. He then uses her Snapchat to send a message out that basically makes her friends and family think that she's run away from home. Now at this point, he's getting ready to try and save himself from whatever trouble he might be in. Now Brian Valera was, again, 19 years old, and he worked at Dairy Queen. Now the same day that he woke up and found Alyssa unconscious, he was due to work a double shift. So Brian decides to basically stuff her in a black crate and go to work as if nothing happened. So he gets to work, but Brian isn't affected by this situation. No one explains him as acting off or being out of it that day. In fact, Brian Valera goes to work and he decides that he's going to brag to co-workers about the body. So he begins to show his co-worker pictures of Alyssa in his bed and basically tells his co-worker that he had his way with her while she was unconscious, she never woke up, and here's the body. Look at it. Here it is for you to see. So Brian Valera clocks out that day. Only he doesn't realize that their co-worker actually had a heart, and the co-worker was only playing along to get more information, because immediately after finding out these circumstances, the co-worker calls the police and basically tells the police what's going on. Now, meanwhile, while this is all happening, her mother is frantic. She's searching for her daughter. She can't find her. But she's about to find her in a minute, because after the co-worker goes to the police go straight to Brian Valera's home. Now, once the police arrive at this home, and I mind you, at this point, Brian Valera is still working a double shift, so he's still at work. But they're at his home searching the home, and when they enter, that's when they discover that Alyssa was in a black plastic crate. And it gets even worse because the roommate evidently knew about this, but the roommate didn't say a word. But once questioned by the police, he spills it all. He says that Brian Valera was basically bragging about what he had to do with the body, saying that he had to break her legs to fit her in the crate, etc. This is something that he's not remorseful about. In fact, Brian Valera has taken this entire situation where he could have just immediately called the police once she was overdosing. But instead, he chose not to. He decided to send pictures out to a group chat and brag to his roommate. So now that the body of Alyssa is recovered, Brian Valera is arrested. Brian would be charged for the violation of Alyssa. He would also be charged with first-degree manslaughter and unlawful disposal of remains. So Brian Valera can't do anything but sit in jail unless he can post this $500,000 bond, which he doesn't manage to do. So now he's in jail, and the family is notified of what happened to Alyssa. They're distraught. They're even more frantic. The entire circle that she hung out with was devastated. Again, Alyssa was someone who was very loving towards others, always kept others before herself. She was, a girl who displayed empathy for others, even if they didn't deserve it. And she was paid back by being violated in the worst way that someone could be done. My heart truly goes out to the family. I know that this has to be a very hard situation to deal with. To know that your daughter has passed away, but there's always a possibility that Alyssa could have been saved had Brian did what he was supposed to do and called the police. She probably would have been administered a shot of Narcan or whatever they use to revive an overdosing victim, and she could possibly still be here today. But with Alyssa being buried, you guys, that is not the end of this story, because it's about to get a lot worse. On top of Alyssa going through these tragic circumstances, the justice system is about to add insult to injury. Now, Brian Valera was a 19-year-old kid, and he had no formal criminal history, so he has his day in court. But I want you to understand that once Brian Valera pleads guilty to all of the charges that I named, Brian Valera would be sentenced to under 3 years to serve.
Gina Pearson still grieves for the angel on her shirt.
I really don't think it's fully hit me yet.
It's been 9 months since her 18-year-old daughter Alyssa died from a drug overdose. Now this mother,
Shock and disbelief.
faces new heartache.
Pissed off.
He never helped and even sent photos to his friends mocking her as she lay there dying. Then he tried to cover it up.
He could have done anything, but he chose to play a game and go to sleep.
Alyssa's family and friends begged for a longer sentence.
In my opinion, Your Honor, I believe Mr. Varela should receive the death penalty.
Varela apologized.
Sorry for my foolish actions. Whatever I get is what I deserve.
In the end, he was sentenced to 34 months in prison, less than 3 years, the result of state sentencing guidelines. He had no criminal history.
I too find the available sentence to be really inadequate.
Gina used a different word.
It's a joke. 3 years for taking somebody's life. It's just a joke. Usually people who do stuff like this don't get away with a slap on the wrist.
After all, she faces a life sentence.
I just keep thinking I'll never see her again.
And with the time Varela's already served at this point, he's looking at more like 2 years in prison or less with good behavior. Alyssa's family tells me they hope to take the fight to the state legislature and challenge some of those sentencing guidelines.
When the judge and prosecutor decided to go forward with this deal and allow Brian Varela to plead guilty in order to receive less than 3 years in prison, they basically blamed the federal guidelines. Now, for those of you who don't know what federal guidelines are, Every judge has a blueprint. It's basically a blueprint for each case and each scenario in which the federal guidelines tell them what they should sentence the person. However, those federal guidelines are not mandatory, meaning they don't have to follow them. So while the judge and the prosecutor are blaming these federal guidelines, it's not something that was mandatory. For them to blame these federal guidelines is a complete joke. I don't get it. Rest in peace, Alyssa Noceda. In this situation, I usually say I hope that you receive the justice that you deserve, but we all know that Brian Varela, he cannot be charged again. Once you're charged, it's said and done. He can no longer face further prosecution. However, we can rally together to try and get that law changed. And maybe we can get some more time on those sentencing guidelines, because to serve under 3 years for what he did is a complete joke. And it makes me say that the justice system is a joke.
Think about me one more time before you go. Someday you'll know. Someday you'll know. You know what I'm going to say? I've been feeling this way for far too long.